The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on Ranger Captain Daniel Hayes as his horse picked its way through the rocky terrain of Devil's Backbone Ridge. The year was 1878, and Hayes had been tracking the Garrett brothers for 3 days through some of the most unforgiving country in West Texas. At 35, Hayes was one of the most effective rangers in the territory, but also one of the loneliest. He'd lost his wife and daughter to cholera 5 years earlier, and since then, he'd thrown himself into his work with dangerous dedication. His fellow rangers respected him, but worried about the hollow look that never quite left his gray eyes. The outlaws he was pursuing, Jake and Tom Garrett and their gang, had robbed a San Antonio bank 3 days ago, killing 2 innocent people in their escape. Hayes had been tracking them through the wasteland, following a trail that led deeper into dangerous territory. As thunder crested a small rise, Hayes pulled up short. In the distance, he could see the remains of a wagon train, 2 overturned wagons, and what looked like bodies scattered around a cold campfire. "Another massacre," he muttered. But as he rode closer, something seemed wrong. There were no arrows, no signs of the typical Comanche attack patterns. This looked like the work of white men, brutal, but different from an Indian raid. Hayes examined the scene carefully. The tracks told a clear story. Multiple shod horses, a dawn attack, then systematic searching of belongings. This wasn't a raid for horses or weapons. This was robbery with a specific purpose. He moved from body to body. An older wagon master, a young couple, 2 children. Each death was a tragedy that reminded him of his own losses. But as he approached the second wagon, Hayes heard something that made him freeze, a soft moan. A young woman in her early 20s was tied to the broken rear wheel of the wagon. Her hands were bound behind her back, her ankles secured to the wheel spokes. She was alive, but barely. Her dark hair was matted with blood, her blue dress torn and stained. Despite her condition, Hayes could see she was beautiful, with dark eyes that flickered with stubborn determination. "Ma'am," Hayes said softly, kneeling and drawing his knife. "You're safe now. I'm a Texas Ranger." Her eyes opened slowly. They said they'd come back for me. Said I was too pretty to waste." Hayes felt cold fury as he cut her bonds. "What's your name?" "Catherine Morrison." "My family, are they?" Hayes looked toward the scattered bodies. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're the only survivor." Tears streamed down her cheeks as he helped her drink from his canteen. "Miss Morrison, I need to ask about the men who did this." "How many?" Catherine struggled to compose herself. 6 men. The leader was big with a black beard and a scar on his left cheek. Called himself Garrett. His brother was smaller, with cold blue eyes. Hayes nodded grimly. "Definitely the Garrett gang. What brought your family this far off the main routes?" Catherine hesitated, then reached into a hidden pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "Before he died, my father told me to give this to a lawman. Said it was more important than our lives." Hayes unfolded the paper carefully. It was a detailed map, showing a hidden canyon in the Davis Mountains. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, Confederate gold cache, $200,000 in double eagles. "My father was a Confederate officer," Catherine explained. "He helped hide Treasury gold before the surrender. He's been carrying the guilt for 13 years and finally decided to turn it over to the authorities." Hayes felt a chill. 200,000 in gold would be worth killing for, explaining why the gang had ventured into dangerous territory. "Miss Morrison, this makes things even more dangerous. The Garrett gang won't give up easily with that kind of money at stake." "Then we need to stop them before they find it," Catherine said, struggling to her feet. "If they get that gold, they'll never be caught. They'll keep killing innocent people." Hayes looked at this woman who'd lost everything yet still thought about justice rather than her own safety. "What you're suggesting is incredibly dangerous. These men are killers." "They already took everything from me," Catherine replied firmly. "But if I can help stop them, maybe my family's deaths will mean something." As Hayes helped Catherine toward his horse, he found himself facing a decision that would change both their lives. He could take her to safety in Redemption Creek, or trust this brave woman to help track down her family's killers. "All right, Miss Morrison," he said finally. "We'll ride together. But we do this my way. and you follow my orders. These men are more dangerous than you can imagine. I understand, Ranger, but I promise you, I won't rest until the men who killed my family are brought to justice." For the first time in 5 years, Hayes wasn't riding alone into danger. The lonely ranger was lonely no more. The small town of Redemption Creek sat baking in the afternoon sun as Ranger Hayes and Catherine Morrison rode down the dusty main street. Hayes guided Thunder to Doc Sullivan's office, where the elderly physician immediately took Catherine inside for treatment. While Doc Sullivan tended to Catherine's wounds, Hayes walked to Murphy's livery stable for information. Bill Murphy, an ex-cavalry sergeant, looked up from his forge. "Afternoon, Ranger. Heard you brought in a survivor from that massacre." "Bill, I need information. The Garrett gang, have you seen them?" Murphy wiped his hands on his apron. "Yesterday morning, just after dawn. 6 riders heading west toward the mountains. But there's something else. About an hour later, another rider came looking for them. A woman." Hayes felt his blood chill. "Describe her." "Tall, dark hair, dressed like a man, armed to the teeth and mean-looking. Called herself Maria Vasquez." The name hit Hayes like a blow. Maria Vasquez was one of the deadliest outlaws in Texas, known for violence and cunning throughout the territory. Hayes returned to find Catherine much improved after Doc Sullivan's care. "How is she, Doc?" "Dehydrated and exhausted, but she'll live. She needs rest, but she's remarkably strong." Catherine slid down from the examination table. "I feel better. Are we ready to continue?" "Miss Morrison, the situation has changed. Maria Vasquez is tracking the same gang. She's one of the most dangerous outlaws in Texas." "All the more reason to stop them," Catherine replied stubbornly. At Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, they shared a meal while Hayes tried to convince Catherine to stay behind. "I understand your desire for justice," he said, "but these aren't just bank robbers anymore." "Ranger Hayes," Catherine said quietly, "haven't you ever had a case that was personal? Something beyond just doing your job?" Hayes felt familiar pain as memories surfaced. 5 years ago, my wife and daughter died of cholera. I was away on ranger business when it happened. Catherine touched his hand briefly. "I'm sorry, but that's why you understand. Sometimes justice isn't just about the law. It's about making sure the people we loved didn't die for nothing." Before Hayes could respond, young Tom Bradley burst through the door, bloodied and exhausted. "Ranger Hayes, the Garrett gang hit the Sullivan Ranch. They took Lucy Sullivan. She's only 16. Hayes was on his feet instantly. "Casualties. Mr. Sullivan's hurt bad but alive. They said they needed the girl for insurance." Catherine's face went pale. The gang was escalating, taking hostages now. "That girl is going through what I went through," she said quietly. "If we don't stop them, she'll die." Hayes looked at Catherine's determined face and made his decision. "All right, but if you're coming, you follow orders without question." As they prepared to leave at dawn, Hayes found himself wondering what he was getting into. Catherine Morrison was not the helpless victim he'd initially thought. There was steel beneath the surface. Tomorrow would bring danger unlike anything either had faced before. But for the first time in years, Hayes wasn't preparing to ride alone. Dawn broke over the Davis Mountains as Hayes and Catherine, accompanied by Sergeant Rodriguez and 2 other rangers, rode west from Redemption Creek. Catherine had insisted on men's clothing for the pursuit, and rode with surprising skill on Belle, a sturdy chestnut mare. "The Sullivan Ranch is 10 miles ahead," Hayes said. 6 horses and a hostage should leave a clear trail." They reached the ranch to find signs of violence everywhere: broken windows, scattered belongings, bloodstains. Pete Gonzalez, the wounded foreman, emerged from the barn. "They rode in at dawn," he reported. 6 men led by the bearded one. "Killed 2 of my boys. Beat Mr. Sullivan when he tried to protect Lucy. Then that woman showed up, Vasquez. Seemed to know their leader, called him Jake." "Did you hear where they were headed?" Catherine asked. "Jake kept talking about some canyon in the mountains. The woman mentioned Angel Canyon, said she knew a shortcut." Following the gang's trail into the mountains, Hayes noticed they were trying to hide their tracks. "They're staying on hard surfaces to avoid leaving prints," he observed. They'd been riding 3 hours when Catherine suddenly raised her hand. "Do you hear that?" In the distance came the unmistakable sound of gunfire. Several shots followed by shouting voices. They followed the sound to a small valley where the Garrett gang had made camp near a stream. But they were under attack by Apache warriors who'd stumbled upon the outlaws in their hunting grounds. The gang's pinned down, Hayes observed through his field glasses. The girl's alive, tied to a tree near their horses. But Maria Vasquez is moving through the rocks, trying to get behind the Apache. Hayes formulated a plan. "There's a creek bed along the east side. Catherine, you and Johnson work your way down there. When I give the signal, ride for the girl. What about you? Rodriguez, Miller, and I will even the odds." Catherine gripped his arm. "Daniel, be careful. I can't lose anyone else." As Catherine moved toward the creek bed, Hayes positioned himself overlooking the valley. He had a clear shot at Jay Garrett, but before he could fire, Vasquez opened up on the Apache from behind, dropping 3 warriors and forcing the others to retreat. Hayes took his shot, the bullet catching Jay Garrett in the shoulder and sending his rifle flying. The outlaw's shout alerted the others to Hayes' position, and bullets began striking around him. "Catherine now!" Hayes shouted. He saw her ride hard toward Lucy Sullivan, cutting the girl's bonds as bullets whined overhead. But Vasquez had spotted them and was moving to intercept. That's when Tom Garrett flanked Hayes, putting a bullet in his arm before Hayes could turn and drop him with 2 shots from his Colt. Vasquez reached Catherine and Lucy first, pressing her gun to the girl's head. "Drop your weapons, or this child dies." But Catherine surprised everyone. "If you're going to kill someone, kill me instead. I'm the one who can identify you." Lucy proved she was her father's daughter, driving her elbow into Vasquez's ribs and breaking free. Catherine tackled the outlaw woman, and they fought desperately for the gun. The weapon fired twice during their struggle. Hayes saw Catherine stumble, but keep fighting with determination that amazed him. Then the sound of approaching hoofbeats filled the canyon. Captain Morrison and a dozen rangers thundered into the valley with weapons drawn. Seeing himself outnumbered and his brother dead, Jake Garrett surrendered. The battle was over. As the dust settled, Hayes knelt beside Catherine, who sat against a boulder pressing her hand to a bleeding wound in her side. "How bad is it?" "Just a graze," she replied, though pale from blood loss. "I'll live. How's Lucy?" The Sullivan girl was shaken but unharmed. Thanks to Catherine's courage, another family wouldn't be destroyed. The aftermath left Angel Canyon eerily quiet except for the groans of wounded men and nervous horses. Hayes examined Catherine's bullet graze, painful but not serious. As he bandaged the wound, Captain Morrison approached. "Daniel, how's Miss Morrison?" "She'll live, but she needs proper medical attention." Morrison looked at Catherine with admiration. "Miss Morrison, what you did today was remarkably brave. Most people would have stayed safe while the law handled things." "I just did what needed to be done," Catherine replied. Morrison's expression grew serious. "There's something you need to know. We found more victims, a homestead family, and a railroad survey crew. The Garrett gang wasn't just robbing banks. They were conducting a campaign of terror." He gestured toward a hidden cave entrance. "We also found the Confederate gold cache, exactly where your map indicated. 200,000 in double eagles." Inside the cave, wooden crates lined the walls, filled with gold coins that reflected the afternoon sunlight. "Your father carried this secret for 13 years, Hayes observed. "That must have been a heavy burden." "He had nightmares about the war," Catherine said quietly. Turning this over was his way of making peace with his past. As they prepared to leave, Hayes found himself walking beside the captured Maria Vasquez. The outlaw woman looked at him with those dark eyes that had haunted lawmen's nightmares. "You fought well today, Ranger. Your woman, too." "She's not my woman," Hayes replied. "She's a brave lady who's been through hell and still found strength to help others." Vasquez smiled wistfully. "I see how you look at her, how she looks at you. I was young once, too. I remember what it felt like to care about someone." "What happened to that feeling?" Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. "It died with my family. When they killed everyone I loved, they burned the softness out of me. After that, there was only anger. It doesn't have to be that way, Hayes said. Sometimes we get a second chance. As they rode toward Redemption Creek, Catherine asked, "What happens now, after the trials and testimony?" Hayes thought about her question, realizing he was actually looking forward to tomorrow instead of just enduring it. "Now we go home. You'll testify. Help put these killers away. And then we figure out what comes next." "I'd like that," Catherine smiled. "You know," she continued, "Redemption Creek could use a good newspaper. Someone to make sure the truth gets told." Hayes looked at her with surprise. "Are you thinking of starting a newspaper?" "I'm thinking it's time I stopped running from grief and started building something positive. Of course, I'd need someone with law enforcement experience to help with the stories." Hayes felt his heart skip. "Miss Morrison, are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership, Daniel. In business and—" She paused, color rising in her cheeks. "We can discuss the details later." As the celebration continued in Redemption Creek, Hayes found himself thinking about the future for the first time in years. The idea of settling down, of building something lasting with this remarkable woman, filled him with warmth he'd thought was lost forever. 6 months later, the Redemption Creek Herald was back in business under the joint ownership of Catherine Morrison and Daniel Hayes. Their first major story detailed the Garrett Gang's crimes and the gold recovery, but the paper became known as an uncompromising voice for justice. Catherine's reward money and Hayes's savings bought the newspaper building and established them as respectable citizens. Hayes resigned from the Rangers, finding he enjoyed uncovering truth through journalism as much as tracking outlaws. On a warm evening, working side by side in their office, Catherine looked up from her writing. "Any regrets?" Hayes looked around their thriving business, then at the woman who'd brought light back into his world. "Only one." "What's that?" Hayes grinned. "I regret it took me so long to find you." 6 months later, Daniel Hayes and Catherine Morrison were married in Redemption Creek's little church, with most of the town in attendance. Years later, when their children asked how they'd met, Daniel would say that sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances. Catherine would add that true strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up and helping others do the same. The real treasure they'd found wasn't Confederate gold, but the golden truth that love can triumph over loss, hope can overcome despair, and sometimes, when you cut someone free from their bonds, you end up freeing yourself as well. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the Redemption Creek Herald as Catherine Hayes put the finishing touches on her latest editorial. At 28, she had become one of the most respected newspaper publishers in West Texas, known for her fearless reporting and unwavering commitment to justice. The sound of children's laughter drifted in from the street, and Catherine looked up to see her 4-year-old daughter Sarah playing with Lucy Sullivan's youngest son. Lucy had married Tom Bradley the year after her rescue, and they now ran the most successful ranch in 3 counties. "Another late night?" Daniel asked, entering the office with 2 cups of coffee and the gentle smile that still made Catherine's heart skip after 5 years of marriage. "The territorial governor's corruption story won't write itself," Catherine replied, accepting the coffee gratefully, "though I suppose it could wait until after breakfast." Daniel, now 39 with silver threading through his dark hair, had never regretted his decision to leave the Rangers. The Redemption Creek Herald had become the most influential newspaper in the region, and their investigations had exposed corruption from local sheriffs to territorial officials. Through the window, they could see the thriving main street of Redemption Creek. What had once been a dying frontier town was now a bustling community of over 300 residents, drawn by the promise of honest journalism and fair treatment under the law. "Any word from Captain Morrison?" Catherine asked. "He's retiring next month. Says chasing outlaws is a young man's game." Daniel chuckled. He asked if we consider covering his farewell ceremony for the paper. "Of course. He deserves recognition for his years of service." A knock at the door interrupted them. Doc Sullivan entered, now graying but still the town's beloved physician. "Morning, folks. Thought you'd want to know. I just received word from the territorial prison. Maria Vasquez died in her sleep last night. Catherine and Daniel exchanged glances. The notorious outlaw had spent her final years in solitary confinement, never speaking of her crimes or showing remorse. Yet Catherine had often wondered what might have been different if someone had shown Vasquez kindness instead of abandonment after her family's murder. "Peaceful, I hope?" Catherine asked quietly. "The warden said she was reading when they found her." Doc Sullivan replied, "Had a copy of your newspaper from last month, the story about the new orphanage in Austin." After the doctor left, Catherine stood at the window, watching their daughter play in the street with the carefree joy of a child who'd never known violence or loss. "Do you think we made a difference, Daniel? All these years of fighting for justice?" Daniel joined her at the window, slipping his arm around her waist. "Look around, Catherine. Look at what this town has become, at the lives we've touched through the paper. Look at our daughter, growing up in a world where truth matters and good people stand up for what's right." The church bell began to toll, calling the faithful to Sunday service. In the distance, they could see families walking together toward the little white church where they'd been married, where their daughter had been baptized, where the community gathered each week to give thanks for their blessings. "Jake Garrett died in prison last year," Daniel said quietly. "The warden told me he never stopped raging about the gold, about what might have been. But Tom Garrett's son, the one born after his father died, he's being raised by his aunt in San Antonio, goes to school, helps in her bakery. He'll never know his father was an outlaw." Catherine nodded, understanding the larger truth he was sharing. "We can't save everyone, but we can try to save the next generation." "Speaking of which," Daniel said with a grin, "I have some news that might interest the publisher of the Redemption Creek Herald." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Official news or personal news?" "Both. Doc Sullivan just confirmed what we've been hoping. We're going to have another baby." Catherine's face lit up with joy as she turned in his arms. Another Hayes to carry on the family tradition of fighting for justice. "Or maybe this one will be a doctor, or a teacher, or a rancher. As long as they're raised to know the difference between right and wrong, I'll be proud." As the church bell continued to toll, calling the community together, Catherine and Daniel Hayes stood in their newspaper office, surrounded by the tools of their trade: typewriters and printing presses, stacks of paper and bottles of ink. But more importantly, they were surrounded by the fruits of their labor: a thriving community, a growing family, and the satisfaction that comes from a life lived in service to others. The woman who had once been tied to a broken wagon, left to die in the desert, had become a voice for the voiceless. The lonely ranger who had ridden the wilderness seeking justice had found something even more valuable: a home, a family, and a partner who shared his commitment to making the world a better place. Outside, the people of Redemption Creek walked to church together, their children running ahead with the boundless energy of youth, their faces bright with hope for the future. It was a future that Daniel and Catherine Hayes had helped build, one story at a time, one act of courage at a time, one choice between right and wrong at a time. And in the distance, barely visible through the morning haze, the Davis Mountains stood eternal and unchanging, keeping their ancient secrets, while the people in their shadow continued the never-ending work of building civilization in the wilderness, one day at a time, one family at a time, one act of love at a time.